To thank the Shanghai Forum and all of your work in preparing this forum and for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to speak. I'm Allan Dyer. I'm the chairman of the Association of Antivirus Asia Researchers, which is focused on preventing the spread and damage of malicious software in Asia and throughout the world, and bringing together researchers in the field to discuss that. And I'm also a committee member of the Information Security Special Interest Group of the Hong Kong Computer Society, which is focused on information security in Hong Kong and education and exchange of information there. So I'm going to give some of my perspective on security and privacy on the internet, and I would like to start with a couple of cases in Hong Kong. So earlier this year, in March, the Registration and Electoral Office had 2 laptops stolen, and the problem with that was the laptops had information of 3.7 million voters. That's all of the voters in Hong Kong stored on them. That was just after the chief executive election in Hong Kong, and that made headline news in Hong Kong. I'm not sure whether you noticed that elsewhere. And on the 31st of March, then I accessed the stolen information, and then the same morning I visited a bank website for online banking sign-up, where you can see that the information required for this bank for the sign-up includes the information that was stolen from the registration of electors' office. And so there's an obvious risk there of information being stolen and then used for other crime. And I would like to show you where I access this information. Actually, are there any police here who want to arrest me for accessing the information? Because actually, this is the den of iniquity where I access the information, and it's the district office in my local district. And in fact, the information I was accessing was my own voter information. So the information is already publicly available at the district office for anyone in the community to access. So perhaps you're now thinking, well, is this theft actually important at all? Yes, I would say it is, because it leads to how we think about our personal information security. And I think there's 3 aspects. How public our personal information is, we need to think about that, and how the information society, the internet that we're building, changes that meaning. Secondly, how we think about security, and how also security conflicts with itself, and how defence in depth in security can fail. And thirdly, what are organisations doing? So supposedly responsible organisations are misusing sensitive information, and what's the risk related to that. So how public is our personal information? Well, actually, the voter information was protected by multiple layers of protection. It was the laptops that were stolen were in a locked room with security guards in the building, but still they got stolen, and there was only a single layer of protection left, which was encryption. And the Registration and Electoral Office downplayed the risk because all the data was strongly encrypted, and therefore no one could actually get the voter information from the encrypted files. But the Charles Mock is the information technology representative on the Legislative Council, and he took a different view. Do not trust the so-called security experts who say the data will be safe with encryption. I think I actually agree with Charles Mock here, because when you think about the staff of the Registration and Electoral Office, they've got that information on the laptop there ready to be used. Actually, they had it ready to be used during the election, and if they're in that position, they're at a big public event, and they want to make sure that they don't delay the important event because they're having trouble getting access to the information. So it's protected by encryption, but do you think they've chosen a strong password? And once the laptop's been stolen, someone can try again until they get the right password and get access to all of the information. So maybe strong encryption isn't enough because there are other ways to get through to the information. And yes, as I said, there's multiple other places where the information is available. The registration and electoral data is also available online. This is the form for accessing it. And the same personal information, well, I'm actually the director of a company, so my ID card number is also available from the company's registry as part of the records there. And for a small fee, you can look up the information of all the directors and get their ID card numbers, which is then potentially usable for criminal purposes like online banking fraud. But the difference between this and having access to the full database unencrypted is in the accessibility. So for this Registration and Electoral Office, you need to read the declaration and agree that you're only going to access your own information. And if you recall the form, it requires you to enter your ID card number and then choose your address from part of from a selection of alternate addresses, and also your full name before it will give you access to the list of constituencies you're allowed to vote in. So it's infeasible from the online system to get access to the full database. And when you go to the district office, they bring out a big fanfold file of paper. And well, when you open that up, you can check by a name or by address, so maybe you can snoop a little bit on your neighbours. But if I pulled out my camera and started taking photos, I'm pretty sure they'll stop me. So the accessibility of the information if you've got the full database is very different, and it can give opportunity for other criminal activity. So the Hong Kong police has a list of online frauds, and that a lot of those frauds are social engineering type of frauds. Sometimes telephone frauds where someone phones up and tries to persuade you that your family member is in trouble and you need to pay an urgent fee for something. Now, that sort of activity suddenly becomes a lot more persuasive if they know the name of your family member. So if you've got access to the full database of voter information, you can check by address, see who's living in the same unit, and maybe you can see that there's some dates of birth because of people who are just turning 18 and just becoming eligible to vote. You can see who the young people are and maybe try and contact one of the older people and persuade them that their youngster has got into trouble. And the social engineering becomes a lot more persuasive if you've got more background information. The ease of use of the personal information really changes the game. And so what's the protection in Hong Kong about personal data? The Personal Data Protection Ordinance is based, I'm not going to go into the details of the ordinance, but it's based around 6 data protection principles. So the data collection principle, you've got to collect the data with lawful intent and inform the user what you're going to be doing with it. And it shouldn't be excessive collection of information. It's got to be, the second principle, accuracy and retention. So you ensure that it's accurate and not kept longer than necessary, which gives you an issue with data life cycle. And the third principle, then it must be used for the purpose for which it's collected, or a directly related purpose, unless you get explicit and voluntary consent for another purpose. Principle number 4, very important, the data security principle. The data user has to take steps to keep the data safe from unauthorised or accidental access. So that's obviously where the registration and electoral office fell down. And the openness principle. The data user needs to take steps to make its policies and practices known to the public and about what data it holds and how it's used. And this final principle, data access and correction. The data subject must be allowed to check the personal data and make corrections if it's inaccurate. Sorry, excuse me. So those are very nice principles. What happens if you break those? Well, the Privacy Commissioner is basically limited to issuing an enforcement notice, which isn't even a slap on the wrist. It's saying, if you do this again, you might get into trouble, which is rather too late, especially for not keeping the data secret. Once the data's been released into the world, into the internet, then you can't ever grab it back. So that is a permanent exposure of the data. And what does it matter if they are going to get into trouble on the second offence? The first offence is bad enough. And we can see the limitations in the second case I would like to talk about, which is an earlier case, for the toy company VTech. They produce electronic toys. They're a company based in Hong Kong. And in November 2015, we found out that they'd exposed personal details of 6.5 million children around the world who were users of their toys and their parents. And that was revealed by a whistleblower, and it got worldwide headlines. But it actually started a few years earlier than that. In 2013, VTech created their Learning Lodge website to work with their electronic toys, and children and their parents were encouraged to register at the website and interact with the website. And that website was pretty certainly insecure from the very beginning. The method that was used to get the data out was probably built into the website at the very beginning. It was a SQL injection attack, which, if you're technical, you'll realise that that's been used, been well known for more than 10 years, and is a very simple attack. So the data wasn't protected in any meaningful way. And the whistleblower contacted a journalist, and the journalist tried to contact VTech. It took 6 days after the first successful contact to the first announcement. Sorry, that was 4 days to the first announcement by VTech, and another 2 days before they suspended the websites. Actually, I would have thought that should have been the other way around. You suspend access to the data first, because that's far more important than telling people if there's continued bad access. And it was only after that they contacted the Privacy Commissioner. As soon as the Privacy Commissioner was contacted, he started an investigation. And also, some months after, when they brought the website back online, there was no independent test since the relaunch. And in the following February, they released new terms and conditions. VTech produced these terms and conditions, which basically say, the security is your problem, we're not taking any responsibility for it. Now, I don't think that complies with the data protection principles. I don't think it could be enforceable, but it's been on the VTech website for almost 18 months, and I don't see that there's been any challenge to that. So, to round up quickly, I think, misusing personal data. Using personal data as an authenticator, that I showed you on the HSBC online banking login, using your ID card number to prove who you are. Your ID card number is public. ID card number is very convenient as a key in your database. But it's also a very big vulnerability because it allows you to connect data from multiple sources together and get a more complete picture of the subject. And we can't think of security in isolation. It's not just about your application. That's the HSBC website. And personal data I see as a crime enabler. If you have someone's address, then you can guess something about their income. So maybe you want to target the rich areas for more ransom and the poor areas for less ransom. So a criminal can maximise what they're getting out of their crime. It enables social engineering. And if you've got lots of background information on a person going right back to their childhood, how many of you have seen authentication questions where they're asking you, what was your first pet? Well, maybe in a few years' time, someone's going to be able to look up the VTech data and get clues about the child's first pet, which they're now an adult and using as online banking authenticator. So Geek Porn was an event for white hat hackers in Hong Kong a couple of weeks ago, and TYY got some interest there for showing how insecure the bicycle rental systems were. She, in 15 minutes, managed to break into multiple bike rental systems. The point is, it's not about that application, that she said. You can steal a bike ride, which is only a few cents, but it's about the information you can get from that and how that can be misused in conjunction with other information. So just to... so my personal recommendations, I think companies should be handling their customer data according to the data protection principles, using appropriate security. You need an effective breach reporting contact point and procedures so that when someone does try to contact you about a breach, your company can deal with that promptly. And you need regular independent security testing and updates. For the law, I would say, well, it sounds, from what I've learned from the earlier speakers, that China is going ahead of Hong Kong here. Hong Kong's law was one of the first in the region, and although it was good for its time, it's looking outdated now. But making the protection a crime, making it a duty to report data breaches, and allowing the Privacy Commissioner to initiate an investigation so that he doesn't have to wait for an actual victim to come forward. And yes, the international aspects of how to do this among multiple countries is a big issue. And preventing misuse of personal identifiers. And whistleblowers, I think, should get some protection so that we can learn more about the insecurities and how to correct them. So finally, I would like to say thank you. And the Antivirus Asia Researchers has an annual conference this year in Beijing, December 6th to 8th, and back to basics, fighting the evolving criminal. So I would like to see you there if you can make it. Thank you.